Okay, folks, you're all very welcome. We may get started, and it's a pleasure to welcome you all to our first QPS Talk Time of 2023. And we have a real treat in store with our guests today. And nice to just welcome everybody back, and we hope to be seeing lots of you throughout the year. So it's a real pleasure to welcome our guest today, and we're going to have a chat with Dr. Suzette, Professor Suzette Woodward. Suzette has worked in healthcare in multiple roles now for over 40 years as a nurse, including working in paediatric intensive care, as a clinical risk manager, and then moving on to do work with the Department of Health and the NHS in the UK, including working through and with many of the bodies advancing patient safety, such as the National Patient Safety Agency, through programs and policy. And she's also made significant academic contributions to safety through research, through teaching, and particularly, I think, recently in writing her 3 books and numerous blogs. And she's got a website that we might ask her to tell us a little bit about later. But finally, I think the thing that really strikes me about Suzette is how she is a connector, and she connects people and ideas to make care safer. So, Suzette, it's a real pleasure to welcome you to our first QPS Talk Time of 2023.
Oh, thank you so much, John. I just wish I was there in person. It'd be such a joy to be in Ireland today, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and we got to meet, and we heard you speak at the NPSO conference back in October, and we had a brief chat on the talk time at that stage. But we thought it was good to get you back and maybe to go into some of those issues in a little bit more depth and spend a bit more time with you. So thank you for giving us your time again today.
My pleasure.
Suzette, I think it's reasonable to describe you really as an innovator and an early adopter when it comes to patient safety. And I think you've witnessed and I suppose contributed to, what you might describe as a revolution of patient safety thinking and practice. It's not always that the concepts of systems in patient safety or the science of patient safety have been talked about. These are relatively new ideas. Just to kind of give us some context, what do you think are some of the major achievements we've made in safety in your career?
Gosh, that's such a brilliant question. The whole issue of safety is really quite young. I mean, when we think about the world of healthcare, even the coinage of the words patient safety really didn't start until around the year 2000 and so. And so we've been learning on the hoof. We've been learning as we do it, and actually that's a joy, because that in itself makes you feel freer when you think, well, it's not esteemed in concepts that have been going on for centuries. This is something that we are all trying to learn to do. And I think that some of the key issues around what we've learned is that we took a lot from different industries. So we asked in the very early days, who does safety? How do they do it? And what do they know that we could do? So we went out to the aviation industry, the nuclear industry, and various others. And they all said, it's really simple. Oops. It's really simple. All you have to do is capture some incidents, do some lovely instant report investigations, and then you can fix the problems because you know all about them. And that sounded so enticing, so intuitively enticing. And over the last 22 years, what we know now is that actually instant reporting and instant investigations are just one small component of what patient safety actually is. They're just ways in which you might collect some information. They're not the only way you can collect that information. And sadly, investigations haven't really taught us as much as we'd like them to have done. So what we know now is that we've been using those tools in a way that really wasn't fit for the complex system that healthcare is. So that's one key message, that actually if you do adopt tools from elsewhere, you really need to think about, how do they apply for me? How do they apply for us? The second thing is that I think that we lost along the way the joy of patient safety. Not only is it a science, it is joyful. How joyful is it to look at systems and think, how can I make these even better than they possibly are? And how can I even design stuff? That's really exciting. How can I design a machine, or I can design the ward, or I can design a process that makes it safer? Instead, what we've done is we've thought about how many times does it go wrong? How can we focus on the failure? And it's become bureaucratic and negative. And as human beings, we tend to focus on the negative way too much. And so the other key lesson for me is the latest iteration of safety, where we've started to look at the positive. What are we doing really well, and what could we do and build on that? How could we replicate what we do really well? How do we know? How can we find that out? And how can we turn that into something far more joyful, so that we can actually start to really see patient safety as a positive, enjoyable exercise to do? So those two key things are for me. The third one, so I'm going with three, probably throughout this whole talk, but the third one is, and it seems so right, it is all about people. It's all about how people interact with each other, interact with processes, interact with the resources they have, interact in ways which could both harm and hinder the way in which we do safety. Which is why so crucially today, we're talking about a healthcare system, and I'm going to sound dramatic, but it feels like it's in a bit of a crisis. And we're talking about a healthcare system where you've got really good people, really lovely, good people with such good intentions, who are so struggling. And they're struggling for so many different reasons. They're struggling because we don't know quite how to learn about how to make things safer. We're struggling because of the whole issue of complexity. And we're struggling because it's really hard to develop those relationships and actually get on with each other when we're so stressed and tired and hungry and to some extent burnt out. So we need to actually figure out what's the answer to all of those things. So that's some of the lessons I think that we've learned over the last 23 years or so.
Thank you. And, that's a lovely, hopeful stance as well. I mean, I think, it's recognizing, I think, the achievements that we've made, but also the hope for using those ideas into the future. And I think one of the things we wanted to talk about today was about how do we apply some of these ideas and concepts and practices, to help us, but also recognizing, the reality of where we are, like you've said as well. And we work currently in a challenging, complex, busy environment. And I think it's important to say here, we're not trying to ignore that. I mean, I think staffing issues need to be sorted out with staff, and working conditions need to be, improved and recognized, and resources do need to be there. But at the same time, there's a reality of where we are, and how do we take some of these ideas and use them to help us in the context that we're in, when it's hard to find the time to learn, new things, and it's hard to actually do these practices. And I know you had some ideas of things, that we can do, kind of really to prepare ourselves before anything goes wrong. That there are some concepts like psychological safety, like a recognition of resilience and learning from excellence, and some of the ideas that we've kind of come to regard as safety too. And how do we take some of those ideas and put them into practice? And let's maybe start with something like psychological safety, which has become really, been recognized as being one of the critical things that we can do. And how do we do that when everything is so busy?
Absolutely. So I think one of the issues to say is that um, psychological safety is, people are talking about it. What I wouldn't want people to think about it is, oh, this is a new fad or a new initiative, or how, oh gosh, they're, coming out with yet something else that we've got to start looking at. Psychological safety, if you really break it down, is again about how we behave towards each other. And we've been doing a lot of this ourselves already. And the essence of psychological safety that people like Amy Edmondson and another person called Timothy Clark talks about really beautifully is that it is about feeling that you belong. It is about being able to ask questions. It's about being able to contribute and being able to challenge. So anyone who's listening today, if you have a think about the teams that you work with, whether you're you feel like you're kind of on the end of the team, or whether you are leading that team, or both, because we do both. We lead and we belong and all of those things. Ask yourself some key questions about whether you feel that everyone around you feels they belong. So this could be in handover or huddles or in a meeting, at any time we interact. Do the people you're talking to feel like they belong, that they are part of that team? And you can do some really lovely things, such simple things, by talking to them using their first name. Hello, Suzette, how are you today? Bringing them in. If somebody interrupts them, by following on from the interruption, pausing and saying, oh, Suzette, you were in the middle of telling me about something. Do you want to carry on? So being really mindful of bringing people into the conversation. And we know that's so important in terms of safety, because what if somebody is sitting there going, do you know what, I don't think that we should be doing it like that. And if they get interrupted and then they feel like they don't really belong and they don't really have enough of a voice, then they may feel frightened to speak out, and immediately then you're creating an unsafe system. And so once you've got people feeling like they belong, and that obviously also interacts with the massive work that brilliant people do in terms of equality, diversity, and inclusivity. So it starts to merge safety with those other concepts as well. Then you move from the belonging to the questioning. So have you been in a meeting where you're desperate to ask a question? And even sometimes you sort of try and lift your hand, but no one seems to respond to you. And again, it's our duty to respond to those people. It is very, very important that we respond, no matter whether we're frightened of that question or that we don't have time for that question. Sometimes we have to slow down and think about, I know we're busy, but actually we need to pause and we need to listen to what people are wanting to know. Questioning means that we then learn. So how brilliant is that? We've gone from questioning to learning. And then once we feel that we belong, we can question and we learn, we can contribute our own ideas. So immediately you're becoming more innovative, more ways in which you can start to look at improving what you do. And then finally, the really hard thing is to challenge. And it's hard for both sides. It's hard to challenge somebody's ideas or thoughts, and it's hard to receive that challenge. So again, you have to understand, and always feel that the intention is about doing good. The intention is about people not wanting to actually make your lives really hard, and to pause and not be judgmental, and to go, okay, I'm going to take that challenge and see what I'm going to do with that. So all of that, as Amy would say, is done with a way without any fear of repercussion. So I've been in so many meetings where I've been intimidated. I've been intimidated by the people around me. I think that they're more powerful than me, or they're more important than me, or they know more than me, or who am I? And it's really important to feel that you do have a voice and that you are seen and you can be heard. And we all have a duty to do that. And if we roll our eyes and if we kind of, belittle somebody, oh God, it's Suzette again, that is just no way to enable people to be free, to speak and to be heard. So psychological safety is really linked to our ability to talk, to speak up, and our ability to disclose. And then, as I say, it's really linked to those cases that we know, those cases of people who've said, gosh, if only I had raised that point, because we might not have done A, B, C, or D. So it is important. And what it does is it frames that foundation for people to take a deep breath and to take part. So all of that stuff. So psychological safety is what we do and we've done for ages. It's not just this new fad, but it is a lovely way of describing how we can actually interact with each other, which leads to a really good, safe system.
Yeah, and we can do these things kind of in peace times as well, can't we? We can build these relationships, and we can kind of learn how to listen better with each other, and to do all these things that really kind of help us when we do need them. And I share an office, and I came in this morning to hear one of my colleagues on a meeting, and as I came in first, I thought, gosh, these are very direct questions, and it took me a moment or two just listening to go, they're able to speak this directly because there's clearly, respect and trust, and a willingness to kind of to embrace those hard questions, and an expectation even from the team to, let's not, hide ourselves in being nice. We can do stuff nicely, but we're not about being nice. And it was a really interesting kind of just thing to watch, and it was clear that these guys were practicing really just overt psychological safety in their meeting.
Brilliant. Absolutely.
And that's one of the preconceptions often. Psychological safety is just about being nice, and being kind of not giving people a hard time, but it's tough love, really, isn't it? I mean, psychological safety.
The word nice is really intriguing. I mean, it's a lot of people say nice is a quite a neutral kind of naff word in some respects. The issue about nice is actually something to really think about, because what we get in the whole new world of looking at safety slightly differently, which is where we want to say, how safe are we in terms of how well do we do, and looking at success rather than simply failure, but also the whole issue of things like a restorative just culture, which is where we say, do you know what, take a step back, don't be judgmental. It is so easy to blame, it's so easy to shame. Don't do those things, because the vast majority of people do not intend to do what they've just done. And you get some interactions from other people going, well, is it just culture just about being nice to people then? And the nice to them means, are we letting people off?
Mm.
And so there's a woman called Brené Brown. She writes beautifully, and she talks about it's. She instead of nice, she talks about it being kind. She says it's really kind to actually speak out. It's really kind to point out to people that there are things that they're not happy with. It is really kind to be clear about what you need, and how to be heard. And it's not just being nice. And in fact, a restorative just culture, if we're going to get into that respect, is definitely not just being nice. It is about saying what's acceptable, what's unacceptable. Actually, some ways in which we work may be unacceptable, and we have to really address that. And so it is not a way of everyone just getting away with stuff, but equally it is very much about being respectful, being caring, being supportive when things don't go as planned. The people who work in restorative just culture, they don't like using the word wrong, and they don't like using words like error. And there are connotations between the language that we use and the way that people perceive safety, because error often means, well, error is a human being, and the human being is messed up. So it's therefore we need to correct the human being. But actually, restorative just culture is all about us acknowledging that human beings sit within systems. They are affected by and they work with systems. The equipment, by systems, it's the equipment that processes the resources, the tasks that you're all expected to do. And all of those things interact with you and others. And it's really hard to do that sometimes, to do it well. So if we come back to the word nice, sometimes we have to really think about sometimes being not nice, but actually that is in fact kind, to actually pull people up or ask some questions about why they thought it was acceptable, or whether they thought it was the right thing to do, and so on. So yes, psychological safety isn't just being nice, it is about being honest, truthful, open, transparent, all of those things, but doing so respectfully, doing so kindly, because at the very end of the day, we're one human being talking to another human being or a group of human beings, and there's nothing worse than that being a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, those threads of kindness and respect really do permeate so many of these things now that we recognize support safety, don't they?
Absolutely. So it is kind to give people clarity. It is kind to communicate really well with people and to give the right information at the right time. I've just been studying some whole issue about why we learn, why we don't learn, how we communicate, how information is absorbed by our own selves, which is I've been reminded about the whole world of memory. And truly, actually, really quite fascinating. I'm probably digressing here, but I've been asking myself, why do people make errors, and what can we do differently to help people in that way? And we know that as human beings, we will always make errors. That we can never have perfection or a zero harm environment. But it really reminded me in terms of memory. So there's the 3 bits of memory. There's the sensory memory, the short-term memory, and the long-term memory. And it's reminded me that in healthcare, we're subjected to so much information. Again, today's context, so much coming at us all of the time. How do we know what to take in and what not? And our memory tries to do things like that. So sensory memory is where somebody might give you the code to get into the unit. So by the way, it's 5042 and you need that, and you need to get into the unit in order to start your shift. And 5042 might be something that you might need to know now, and it changes every day, so you don't need to know anymore. So your sensory memory will go, right, I've known that for getting in, and I don't need it anymore. So it drifts off. And it's the same for all kinds of pieces of information. They come in and then they just drift out again. But our short-term memory will say, well, what if I needed it tomorrow? So I might actually say to myself, I'm going to actually really think about 5042, and tomorrow I'm going to try to remember 5042. And the best way we can do that is to remember it associated with, say, some memories associated with those numbers. And then if we're going to use that every single day for the rest of our careers, it's going to move from our short-term memory to our long-term memory. The reason why I'm showing all of that is that an enormous amount of things that don't go as planned are because we didn't hear the right information, or we misinterpreted the information or misunderstood it, or just didn't go into our long-term memory. And yet people think, but I told them about that yesterday. Why on earth didn't they remember that today? But unfortunately, we are not great like that. So we need solutions that help us with our memory. Obviously, things like writing things down, hoorah. Things like taking photos with your iPhone or whatever other phone that you've got to actually go back to and remind what you're expected to do. But also having back to that psychological safety, the ability to go, I know you told me this yesterday, but forgive me. It's completely gone out of my brain. I could tell you the science behind that, but I just need you to remind me what that was. So I've kind of mixed up all sorts of things there, but the whole issues of error and memory and psychological safety, again, they're all interdependent and interrelated with each other. So sorry if I've gone off on a tangent.
And you know, I suppose that's the whole learning of human factors is the things that enhance us and make us amazing as people, but also the things that limit us, and getting a better understanding of them, you know, has again been another, I think, leap forward in terms of safety thinking over the last 20 years, you know, coming again from other industries and been brought into healthcare and maybe more widely kind of adopted. And maybe that kind of leads us into, you know, ideas again of learning, you know, how do things go right all the time, and who would think that that was a novel way of learning about patient safety, about looking at all the good stuff, but it really has started to teach us lessons, hasn't it?
Absolutely. So this sort of builds on the work. There's a gentleman called Eric Honegel, and he talks about safety 1 and safety 2. Just for the audience, safety 1, if they've heard these terms before and they're not sure what they are, safety 1 is our current predominant approach, which is very much looking at failure and incident reporting and incident investigations. And absolutely, there is a place for safety 1. It's not shove that to one side. We won't need to do that anymore. There is a place for all of that. But actually, there's an emerging approach, which is to say, well, let's look at safety 2. And safety 2, for those that have been studying it, is where you look at failure and success together. So you're basically looking at the way you do things, and you can. So I'll give you an example. So when in the 1980s, quite some time ago, I was a staff nurse on an intensive care unit, paediatric intensive care, and I was responsible for witnessing a drug that ended up by being 10 times the dose for a child. This was mortifying. At the time of my life, I absolutely did this thing that we all do, which is we personalize it. And it was all done to me. And in fact, it was perpetuated by everyone around me that said, why on earth did you do this? This is, you know, I thought, Suzette, you were a better nurse than this. And so I very much internalized it as down to me. Whereas in fact, what I didn't ask myself is questions like, what do I think the factors were that led me to be so erroneous in the way that I checked something? But also I didn't ask myself, what do I normally do? What do I normally do every day when I'm witnessing or even administering, dispensing, or whatever it might be around medications, or pretty much any aspect of the complex healthcare that we do? What do I normally do? And I wouldn't have asked myself that. I wouldn't even thought about trying to study that in any way, shape, or form. But actually, that is at the heart, because that's telling us what I normally do and therefore why it failed this time. So it really helps you ask that question. Why did I fail this time when most of the time I get it right? And then when you do that, you go, okay, how do I get it right? And you can do that in so many brilliant, brilliant ways. You can talk to colleagues. You can really sit down and have a really lovely huddle around, let's just break this down. How do we normally deliver our medicines in this unit? And let's talk about it. Let's really open it out. Even people going, yeah, but I do this every day. I'm on I'm sort of on automatic pilot doing all of this stuff. Why do we need to actually just be introspective? But actually it really brings out the way we actually maintain safety. So this is the brilliance of safety too, which is really asking ourselves, how do we maintain safety and then keep doing that? And we can do that also in ways that, this is a bit of a technical term, but it's called reflexivity or reflexivity, video reflexivity, where you can actually film something that you do every day. It's a brilliant professor called Jessica Mesman who says, sometimes we need to actually notice the ordinary. Sometimes we need to study the mundane things that we do, which can really highlight how they work and how they might not, and how we can actually learn to prevent that from happening. So that's the proactive resilience approach to safety. Resilience, by the way, isn't just telling people to just buck up. It isn't about telling people you've got to be resilient and giving them a few tips on how to do something like yoga or mindfulness. That is not resilience. Resilience is about helping people think about how they can maintain the care that they provide, knowing that they as human beings can make mistakes, and how they can have everyone help them do that. So this is the brilliant world of safety too, looking at it so much more proactively and positively, and asking that key question, why did it fail this time when most of the time it actually goes okay?
And one of the nice, I suppose, manifestations of safety too has been through learning from excellence, which I know is a cause dear to you, and the work of Adrian and Emma Plunkett and the group. Uh, you know, how do you think that makes us safer? How do you think learning from excellence makes us safer? As let's say, through excellence reporting that the folks in the learning from excellence uh, projects, recommend.
Well, actually, they're starting to really demonstrate that it does. So Adrian and Emma and various and colleagues around, and including people like Chris Turner, have started to really understand the importance of praise, the importance of valuing and being grateful to people. So it takes absolutely nothing to say thank you, and a purposeful thank you. So, hi, Suzette, I really loved the way that you spoke to that family. You sat down, you kept eye contact, you were really clear about what you were trying to say, reinforces some of the things that we do that we're not sure whether we're that good at or not. And then somebody actually says, no, you are, you really are. And so you think, oh God, I really want to do that again. And so what it does is learning from excellence. There's a way in which we highlight what people do well. Now, you don't have, and unfortunately, the excellence is, Adrian would love it if we didn't use the word excellence even, because just doing a really lovely job doesn't have to be excellent or amazing. It just is being caring and thoughtful and kind and clear and all of those things. And pointing that out to somebody makes a genuine difference. You feel people value you. And if you feel valued, there is some lovely research that shows that being valued makes you more productive, makes you increases your morale, increases your ability to do what you do. And they've done this brilliant project called the Praise Project, which is where they've shown if you congratulate people on the way that they do their medication safety, their prescribing, it makes them safer. They have been shown that there are less errors in medications if you praise people for what they do, which is outstanding. So what is not to like? To go around valuing and being grateful to people that leads to safer care, utterly brilliant.
And when you think about it, we're not doing extra work here. People are doing their work. We're making it safer by pointing it out, how well you're doing your work. And, so in terms of the things we were talking about earlier, how do we find the time to do this? The people who are delivering safety aren't doing anything extra. We're just taking a little bit of time to reflect on that to them and tell them about it.
Yeah, when I was doing a campaign called sign up to safety, and I asked people what was the biggest barrier to doing safety, they said time. Time and time again, they said time. And so what we had to do is try to figure out how you can do some of these things that don't, as you say, add time to. So in some respects, we wanted to actually move away from all of that bureaucracy, trying to say this is about how we interact with each other. This is about the conversations that we have. And that isn't added time. You're already doing that. You're already having those conversations. Yeah. So can you make those conversations even better? Can you make people feel heard? Can you make people feel safe? Can you do it in such a way that is kind, not the whole incivil or bullying approach, unfortunately, that we know exists in healthcare, that you can try to move away from all of that and to really think about how you are with people, how you care about those people, and how you might have to slow down, and sometimes you might have to stop some things. So some of this is all about ourselves going, what is working, what isn't working, and do we actually need to do that anymore, and should we stop? That frees us up even more to have more time to care for each other and for our patients. Because for one of the crucial messages I always want people to take home, if you care for each other, the caring for patients comes from that. If you care for each other and care for the people that provide the care to our patients, and you are, as I said before, grateful for them, and you thank them, and you're kind to them, there is nothing that takes time to do all of those things. So however busy you all are out there, and I know it's incredibly stressful, I urge you to just think about stepping back, taking a pause and thinking, my words matter, my response matters. And if I am much more caring towards somebody else, they may well in turn be caring back to me. And that will ultimately lead to safer care.
Right. There's just one or two questions coming in there, and sort of links in with what you were just saying there, Suzette. Somebody had mentioned that they had done a course when they were working in Australia around the language and confidence to escalate and speak up. And it just sort of struck me when you were talking about incivility, and Chris Turner has some really good evidence around the impact in terms of medication safety and risks and all that sort of stuff where there is incivility. But if incivility and bullying are part of somebody's environment, it's not obviously the way we want to be working, but if it is the case, have you any suggestions for them on how to escalate concerns around patient safety and speak up in that environment?
Yes. So to reiterate what Chris finds is, and there's been a huge amount of research that has shown that incivility, let's just take incivility rather than bullying, because I think that one crucial thing is you have to separate the two. So incivility leads to a loss of cognition. It means that you don't actually react as quickly as you could do because you're unnerved by it, and it questions who you are, and it questions your abilities. And so even if you are sharp with somebody, if you're rude with somebody on just a relatively short-term basis, it will impact on people's ability to perform. So one of the crucial things is that we need to, in our own selves, understand that. One of the solutions is to look inwards, is to say, am I like that? And if I am like that, what should I do about that? The second thing is that when we talk about incivility, in the main, it is people who are good people. And so by turning it and saying, Suzette, you're a little bit sharp there, are you okay? Because you're not normally like that. You're normally really smiley and cheerful, and there's something not quite right about you today, and forgive me if I say all of that. So you have to, be kind and compassionate when you're calling it out, but it is about asking them if they're okay, because often it is the reasons why they're being incivil is because they're not okay. And so it is about trying to find out what that might be. And sometimes those conversations may be really hard, and sometimes they are really easy with somebody going, God, I'm so sorry. But if they're really hard, you might have to have 2 or 3 conversations. And Chris talks about this, that 2 or 3 times you need to have that same conversation, and ultimately that person, the research shows that that person recognizes it after about 2 or 3 conversations that they need to behave differently. Bullying is completely different, and we actually have to call bullying out in a very different way, because it is harmful and it is unacceptable. So that is where you start to actually go to other people and say, this person is behaving in this way, and I need to give you, and you have to have very clear examples, because calling out bullying has to have some evidence base behind it. It's not just somebody being rude. It is very, very different. And unfortunately in healthcare, sometimes we label bullies as just being rude. Oh, they're just like that. Or we label those that are incivil, who are, because they're stressed or whatever it may be, being rude, as bullies. And if you do that, you don't address those two things differently. So address them differently, really go for the bullying in terms of escalation, talking to the to colleagues around you, finding out whether it's just you that it's affecting or others, and escalating to a person of authority. And that is, again, hard to do. And I hate the word whistleblower, because I think that means you've failed in some way, and that somebody has had to feel like that. Going back all the way to the beginning of our conversation, if we have a psychologically safe environment, people should feel therefore able to go to somebody and say, I'm really unhappy with the way that somebody is behaving towards me, and I think it is bullying rather than just incivil, and these are the reasons why. So it's for me, it's those ways of addressing it. I don't know if that has helped.
I think that's really helpful and captures a lot in a very, very short time frame. One of the other questions that had come up was about convincing healthcare managers that we need to change direction with regard to patient safety. So incident investigations haven't made improvements per se, and there's 20 years of data, but sort of very little change. Is there a way that we can move forward, to the next phase?
Yes. So we could blind people with some science. We can give them the facts and figures about what we're learning and what we're not learning, and that we can actually point to some stories. Storytelling is actually an astonishingly good way of trying to get information across to people. We can actually show them stories. So when I talk about 10 times the dose drug error that I was involved in the 1980s, it's still happening today. So we can say things like, in a very non-confrontational way, tell me how we need to learn better. Because if you think that incident reporting and incident investigation is the only way to learn, then why are we still having the same things that are happening all of the time? And so could we actually start looking at something maybe differently? Are there different ways to learn? And we know that there are different ways that we can learn. I don't like insisting that everything that's happening in England is therefore everything that you should be adopting anywhere else. However, what I would say is there is something going on in England which is intriguing, which is the latest iteration. They had a serious incident framework, which was very traditional and is probably very similar to the one that you have in Ireland, and I'm in fact sure it is. But what they're doing is moving to something called the Patient Safety Incident Response Framework. They call it PSERV for short. And you may be genuinely interested in PSERV because they're starting to use a different language, and they're saying, we haven't done what we need to do when it comes to learning, and that the serious way we've done in serious instance isn't working, and that we need to change that. And I think that you may want to have a look at that over the pond and say, what can I learn from that for my care setting? And you might want to point that out to the managers and the regulatory industry and so on, to say, look, they're starting to look at things in a very different way. They're starting to look at things from a systems perspective, definitely not naming and blaming and shaming people. And they're also starting to say, maybe we don't need to even perhaps, and this is where it gets tricky, do an investigation, because we've done multiple investigations on this particular issue. Perhaps we should just be revisiting the recommendations and whether they were the right recommendations in the first place. Maybe they need changing, or we need to actually start working much harder on those recommendations. So it changes your emphasis to looking at the solutions rather than continuously just investigating. And equally, the last point is that we're not very good at skilling people up in doing those investigations. We're very good at just asking anybody to do an investigation, which you would never do in any other industry. And I think it's time for us to understand that there is a professional need to do these things in a really skilled way. We owe it, in fact, to our staff to do it in a skilled way. Otherwise, we're just wasting their time. And so those are the things that we're learning in England. And I'm sorry, because I hate that when they go, well, just look what England's doing. It isn't a question of that. It is that it's intriguing, and I think you could be curious about it, and it may actually help some of the conversations that you have with the managers that you're working with.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. And there's a lot more questions there, but I'm very conscious of time, so I might pass back over to John.
Thanks, Suzette. Yeah, thanks, Juanita. Yeah, great questions. I see lots of questions there, and we might we can put a link up to that PSURF afterwards if you have some information on it, Suzette. Yeah, Suzette, unfortunately, we're kind of coming close to the end. So I maybe just want to ask you one kind of final question that might take us a few minutes just to respond to. But you are clearly a leader in the field of patient safety. You clearly have experience. You know, the things we're talking about have often been regarded as, you know, back to that word nice again, or things that we'd like to do if we only had the time, but we've got other important things to do. You know, that this is the nice stuff, but maybe this is the stuff. You know, maybe this is where I should be putting 90% of my attention if I'm a leader in patient safety, and maybe, you know, flipping the amount of attention I give to some of the other things. What do you think?
So there's a wonderful guy from New Zealand called Carl Horsley, and he says, and I'm going to be not using his exact words, but he says, what is this whole safety thing in terms of the way people see it as something in isolation? Everything we do is safety. And then he said, and then he follows that with, obviously that feels a bit overwhelming, because if everything we do is safety, then where do we start? So one of the things that we can do is truly understand our working lives, truly understand how we do things, and that people understand that there's a difference between what we actually do and what people think that we do, and that we need to narrow that. As you know, in human factors terms, they call it the difference between work as imagined and work as done. And I think that that's one of the issues that really brings safety to life, because it is starting to say, this is what I do on a daily basis. How can I do it safer? And how can I also understand what people are expecting me to do, and narrow that gap, and show people that in fact what they're expecting me to do might not work, and it might be frustrating, and all of those things. But the other thing is that patient safety is never in isolation. Let's move away from Chris's Carl's view that safety is everything, but actually, if you do see it as a component of everything that we do, it is interdependent and interrelated with all sorts of other things. So when somebody says, well, today I'm doing equality, diversity, and inclusivity, tomorrow I'll do patient safety, and the next day I might do flow, or look at processes. If you actually then say, do you know what, they're all part of the same jigsaw picture, whatever it might be, but you start to work so much more together. So there aren't just separate initiatives to do with this, this, and this, that there are initiatives that work hand in hand to deal with even things like the climate crisis, as well as our equality work, as well as the way in which we interact with each other, and so on. So bring them together, because then you're actually bringing multiple skills and expertise. But equally, it is really important to understand that by bringing those things together, you are bringing people together. And that conversation then means that we're talking safety, we're talking equality, we're talking addressing those issues in a way that's so much more proactive and positive, and it's not just yet another initiative. And my final point is that we're quite good at taking an issue like falls or pressure ulcers or sepsis and addressing those issues in isolation. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but there are things that thread through every single one of those things, which are usually things like communication, information sharing, our relationships, our interdependencies. Look at those things, the cross-cutting themes, and you'll start to address those issues as a whole, that complexity again. So you're not just looking at sepsis, you are looking at sepsis and falls and pressure ulcers, because you're looking at the things that run through them.
Yeah, and we just need to trust ourselves on these things, don't we? It can be hard to take this different approach.
Yeah, hard, but totally enjoyable. I'm sorry, I'm one of life's, optimists. it is an absolute joy to do this stuff. I don't understand why people don't think it is. So it is totally brilliant to really think about, how can I be the very best me today, tomorrow, and forever? And how can I help my colleagues be the same? So you come in with such joy of wanting to do this. So even doing things like improvement projects should be seen as exciting and innovative. Even just filming some of the stuff that we do and then sharing it with colleagues should be seen as joyful and curious and exciting. So I you know, that may feel really hard when it's so busy, but Don Berwick describes it so beautifully when he talks about bringing the joy to people's work. It is a crucial part of how we work in healthcare, bringing the joy back to what we do. And that is the same for patient safety.
Well, thank you very much. And I think it's been said, leaders are dealers in hope. And I certainly feel you've opened 2023 and QPS TalkTime with lots of hope at a time that is difficult, you know, and I think, you know, all the things we've talked about, I suppose, build up your psychological safety capital, you know, that, you know, you can draw on when you need it, you know, and simple little things like gratitude, or affirming or reflecting back good things, positive things to people. It doesn't take a lot of time. It just needs us to be aware of it, doesn't it? And thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you. I have to flag up, there's a lovely podcast, Suzette, that has just landed on the Learning from Excellence team website with you. It's their Better Together podcast. And I think if people have enjoyed our conversation today, they can get to have a listen to you, you know, go into some other problems and great depth in that podcast with Adrian and Chris on the Better Together podcast, which is available online. So thank you so much for opening 2023 with us, Suzette. Thank you. So, folks, just to kind of make you aware of some things that the Quality and Patient Safety Directorate is involved in and doing. This is something, again, to be aware of. It's a wonderful resource, the Quality and Patient Safety Prospectus 2023, and it makes you aware of all the resources that the Directorate has in terms of some of that is online and printed, and also things that we can do to help. So check out that there's a web connection there, a link that you can if you take a picture of that, or it'll be up online afterwards. We'll put it up in the chat as well. Again, encouraging people to get on the map. You know, it's nice to know who you are and who we are. And like I said at the beginning, I think Suzette's greatest strength is connecting people and ideas, and I think this is the first step to that connection. So we want to join up all the people working in quality and safety in Ireland and connect you with each other and to help you do that. So do register yourself there and get curious as to who's working in your area and in the areas of your interest, and you can use the map to do that. Another community, again, we're encouraging people to join, and again, the advantage of this is that it's across Ireland, Northern Ireland, and the rest of the UK. So we're joining up improvers, people interested in quality safety from all backgrounds in healthcare. So again, you can contact Mary Lawless or Roisin Egginton for information there. Their emails are there, or just go on and check out Q. There's some great resources and great opportunities that Q gives to people, and it's free. So in a couple of weeks' time, we will be back. Really looking forward to meeting Tom Foley. He's going to talk to us about building a learning healthcare system. Tom is a consultant adolescent, child and adolescent psychiatrist in the Northwest, but he's also somebody who has done a lot of work on understanding learning within healthcare systems, and I think you'll really enjoy that. It's, again, it's novel. It's really opening up some interesting new areas, and I think builds on all the things we spoke about with Suzette today. So we're up on Twitter, so please do tweet, do check out our YouTube channel as well. You can subscribe to that, and that's where the recording of today's session will be posted afterwards. And finally, just to thank everybody again. Myself and Juanita are the front of house, but I want to thank all the people who've made today happen. So especially Chris and Shima and Maureen, thank you very much. So see you in a few weeks' time. Bye-bye.